The grid fails at 9:47 on a Thursday evening. No solar flare warning preceded it, no geomagnetic storm briefing prepared the population. The electromagnetic pulse arrives without theatrical introduction. Within 3 seconds, every cell tower in a 200-mile radius becomes architecturally decorative. Your phone screen flickers once and dies. The silence that follows is not poetic, it is absolute. You stand in your kitchen holding a dark rectangle of glass and aluminum that cost you $800. It now has the functional utility of a paperweight. The refrigerator hum stops. The Wi-Fi router's tiny green lights extinguish. You instinctively try the light switch. Nothing. You reach for your phone again, forgetting for the second time in 8 seconds that it is dead. This reflex will repeat 19 more times in the next hour. Your brain has been trained for 15 years to solve every problem, answer every question, and fill every silence with that glowing screen. But the infrastructure that made that possible has just become historical. And you are now operating in a timeline where none of the skills you use daily will function. Most people believe they understand what a blackout means. They imagine candles and flashlights. They think about waiting a few hours until the utility company fixes the transformer. They do not think about water systems failing within 18 hours when backup diesel generators run dry. They do not consider that every gas station pump requires electricity to function. They do not calculate how quickly a city of 2 million people will exhaust bottled water supplies when trucks cannot refuel and traffic lights are dark. The average American household has 3 days of food. The average city has a 7-day supply chain buffer under perfect conditions. Remove electricity and telecommunications simultaneously, and that buffer collapses to 36 hours before panic buying becomes violent competition. The phone's dying is not the disaster. The phone's dying is the moment you discover how many survival skills were externalized to technology you no longer control. And the gap between your current capability and your actual need is measured in knowledge your grandparents assumed you possessed, but never taught you because they assumed the grid was permanent. The first skill that becomes critical within 4 hours is navigation without satellites. Your mental map of your own city extends roughly 12 blocks from your home and workplace. Beyond that, you have traveled thousands of times using turn-by-turn verbal instructions from a machine. You have never once looked at the sun's position to determine direction. You have never used a physical map under time pressure. You probably do not own a physical map. If you did, you would not know how to orient it to terrain without a compass. And if you owned a compass, you would likely hold it flat and spin in circles, wondering why the needle does not point toward your destination. The magnetic compass points to magnetic north, which is not true north. The declination angle between them varies by location. In Maine, it is currently 16 degrees west. In Washington state, it is 15 degrees east. Holding a compass in Montana and walking toward the needle's north will put you roughly 400 feet off course for every mile traveled. After 10 miles, you are nearly a mile from where you intended to be. This error compounds in wilderness terrain, where landmarks disappear and valleys all look identical. Your ancestors navigated using the sky because it is the only map that cannot be lost. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but not precisely. In summer, it rises northeast and sets northwest. In winter, it shifts to southeast and southwest. At noon, the sun is always due south in the northern hemisphere. Always. This is not approximate, it is geometric fact. If you drive a stick into the ground and mark the shadow's tip every 15 minutes, the shortest shadow of the day points true north. You now have a cardinal reference. From there, you can orient yourself to any destination without electronic assistance. But this requires you to stop, to wait, to observe. The skill is not complicated, it is patient. Impatience is the trait most eroded by smartphone dependency. The average person checks their phone 96 times per day. That is once every 10 minutes during waking hours. Your attention span has been fractured into 10-minute intervals for a decade. Now, you must sustain focus for 3 hours to execute a navigation task your great-grandfather performed at age 12 without conscious thought. The skill gap is not intelligence, it is behavioral conditioning. The second skill surfaces when darkness falls and you realize you cannot create light safely. You have lighters, you have candles, you do not have the knowledge to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning or structure fires. A single candle produces 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit at the flame tip. Paraffin wax candles release toluene and benzene when burned, both of which are carcinogenic in enclosed spaces. If you burn 4 candles in a room with poor ventilation for 6 hours, the carbon monoxide concentration can reach 70 parts per million. At that level, healthy adults experience headaches and nausea. Children and elderly occupants lose consciousness. You do not notice this happening because carbon monoxide is odorless and your cognitive function degrades before you recognize the symptoms. Every winter, hundreds of people die from using outdoor heating devices indoors during power outages. They know intellectually that generators produce exhaust. They do not emotionally accept that cracking a window 2 inches is insufficient ventilation. They run the generator in the garage with the door closed because it is cold outside. They die in their sleep. Safe fire management is a precision skill set. Your ancestors understood draft dynamics because their survival required it. They knew that heat rises and pulls fresh air behind it. They built fires near chimneys or vents that created convection currents. They understood that a fire needs oxygen and produces gases that must escape. Modern humans see fire as aesthetic. We light candles for ambience. We do not calculate BTU output or measure air exchange rates. When the power fails and temperatures drop to 18 degrees overnight, you will move a propane heater into the bedroom. You will make up dead if you do not crack 2 windows on opposite walls to create cross-ventilation. The crack must be at least 4 inches. This is not paranoia. This is thermodynamics. Propane heaters designed for indoor use still consume oxygen and produce carbon dioxide. In a sealed 12 by 12 room, a 20,000 BTU heater will deplete oxygen to unsafe levels in under 3 hours. You will feel tired. You will lie down. You will not wake up. This kills people every single year, and every single one of them believed they were being careful. The third skill becomes essential when you realize you cannot identify safe drinking water. Your tap stops flowing after 18 hours when municipal reservoir pressure fails. You have 12 bottles of water. You have 4 people. That is 3 bottles per person. At 1 gallon per person per day for drinking alone, you have 1.5 days of hydration. Then you must find water. The creek behind your neighborhood looks clear. It is not safe. Giardiacysts are invisible and survive in 40-degree water for months. Cryptosporidium oocysts are 4 microns in diameter. You cannot see them. You cannot smell them. Drinking untreated surface water gives you watery diarrhea within 7 days. In a grid-down scenario with no medical care, diarrhea is lethal. You lose 1 liter of fluid per day. You become dehydrated. Your kidneys fail. This is not third world problem. This is basic microbiology. Boiling water kills all pathogens if maintained at a rolling boil for 60 seconds at sea level. For every 1,000 feet of elevation, add 1 minute. At 6,000 feet, boil for 6 minutes. But boiling requires fuel and a container. You have a pot. You do not have firewood. You do not know how to identify dry wood by sound. Dead branches still on the tree snap cleanly. Dead branches on the ground absorb moisture and bend before breaking. Wet wood produces smoke and creosote. Creosote is unburned carbon. It coats your pot and lungs. It reduces heat efficiency by 40%. Starting a fire with damp wood is possible, but requires thin splits and a teepee structure that allows airflow. You must feather the kindling with a knife so the surface area increases. You need 8 times more surface area on damp wood to achieve ignition than on dry wood. This is not mentioned in survival shows because it is tedious, but tedium is the texture of real survival. There are no montages. There's only the repetitive scraping of a knife against a stick until your hands blister.
The fourth skill emerges when you need to preserve food without refrigeration. Your freezer contains 40 pounds of meat. In 12 hours, it will begin to thaw. In 24 hours, bacterial growth begins. At 48 hours, it is unsafe. You cannot eat 40 pounds of meat in 2 days. You must preserve it. Salting is the oldest preservation method. It works by osmosis. High salt concentration draws water from bacterial cells and meat tissue simultaneously. Bacteria dehydrate and die. Meat dehydrates and becomes inhospitable to new bacteria. The ratio is critical. You need a 3.5% salt solution for wet brining, or a salt crust that covers the entire surface for dry curing. 3.5% means 35 grams of salt per liter of water. You do not have a scale. 1 tablespoon of table salt weighs 18 grams. 2 tablespoons per liter is approximately correct. You submerge the meat completely. You weigh it down with a plate. You store it in the coolest location available. In 60-degree temperatures, this buys you 14 days. At 80 degrees, you have 5 days before spoilage begins despite salting.
Smoking meat adds a second preservation vector. Smoke contains phenols and formaldehyde, both of which are antimicrobial. The heat from smoking also reduces moisture content. You need a sustained smoke temperature between 180 and 220 degrees for 6 to 8 hours. Too hot and the meat cooks without drying. Too cool and bacteria survive. Controlling temperature without a thermometer requires hand proximity testing. If you can hold your hand 6 inches above the fire for 8 seconds, the temperature is approximately 200 degrees. 4 seconds means 300 degrees. 2 seconds means 400 degrees. This is imprecise but functional. Your ancestors used this method for 10,000 years. It worked because they practiced it annually. You have never done it. Your first attempt will produce charred outside and raw inside. Your second attempt will be better. There is no shortcut to embodied knowledge. The fifth skill becomes necessary when you need to communicate beyond shouting distance. Your neighbor is 4 miles away. You need to tell them you have medical supplies. You have no phone, no radio, no vehicle with fuel. You must send a message. Smoke signals are visible for 15 miles in clear conditions. 3 puffs in rapid succession is the universal distress signal. But creating controlled puffs requires a blanket or tarp to interrupt the smoke column. You build a smoky fire using green wood or damp leaves. You hold the blanket over the fire. You lift it rhythmically to release pulses of smoke. This only works in daylight and clear weather. At night or in fog, you need fire signals. A fire visible from 4 miles requires a fuel stack at least 4 feet tall that burns intensely. This consumes wood faster than you can gather it alone. You need preparation. You need to stockpile fuel in advance. You need to position the fire on high ground with clear sight lines. None of this is intuitive. All of it is essential. The sixth skill is wound care without modern supplies. You cut your hand while processing wood. The cut is 2 inches long and deep enough to see subcutaneous fat. It needs closure. You have no sutures. You have no butterfly bandages. You have honey in the pantry. Honey is hyperosmotic and antibacterial. It has been used for wound care for 4,000 years. You clean the wound with boiled and cooled water. You apply honey directly to the wound. You bandage it with clean cloth. You change the dressing twice daily. This works because honey's low water activity prevents bacterial growth, and its hydrogen peroxide content kills existing bacteria. but you must use raw, unpasteurized honey. Processed honey has reduced antimicrobial properties. You probably have processed honey. This is a knowledge gap that becomes life-threatening when infection sets in 3 days later and you have no antibiotics. The seventh skill is fire starting without matches or lighters. Your lighter runs out of fluid on day 6. You have no backup. You need fire for boiling water. You must create it from friction. The bow drill is the most reliable friction method. You need a fireboard, a spindle, a bow, and a handhold. The fireboard is a flat piece of soft wood, like cedar or cottonwood. The spindle is a straight stick 3/4 of an inch in diameter. The bow is a curved branch with cordage tied at both ends. You carve a depression in the fireboard. You loop the bowstring around the spindle. You press down on the spindle with the handhold and saw the bow back and forth. The spindle rotates against the fireboard. Friction generates heat. At 450 degrees, wood dust begins to smolder. You carve a notch from the depression to the edge of the fireboard so the ember falls into a tinder bundle. The tinder bundle is dry grass or shredded bark formed into a bird's nest shape. You transfer the ember into the tinder. You blow gently until flame appears. This process takes 20 minutes if you know what you are doing. It takes 2 hours if you do not. Your hands will blister. Your shoulders will burn. You will question whether it is possible. It is possible. Humans did this for 60,000 years, but it requires wood selection knowledge you do not have. Hardwoods do not work. Wet woods do not work. Resinous woods gum up the drill. You need specific species and specific moisture content. This is not explained in 10-minute videos. It is learned through failure and observation. Every skilled practitioner failed 50 times before succeeding. You do not have 50 attempts worth of energy in a survival scenario. You need this skill now. You needed to learn it 5 years ago. The eighth skill is tracking time without clocks. You need to know when to wake, when to travel, when to rest. Circadian rhythm helps, but is imprecise. Sundials are accurate to within 15 minutes. You drive a stick vertically into flat ground. You mark the shadow's tip every hour. You connect the marks. You now have hour lines. Tomorrow, the shadow will follow the same path, but this requires a full day of observation to calibrate. If you need time immediately, you use hand measurements. Extend your arm fully. Each finger width between the horizon and the sun represents 15 minutes of daylight remaining. 4 fingers equal 1 hour. This method works because the sun travels 15 degrees per hour across the sky, and your finger at arm's length subtends approximately 1 degree of arc. This is a geometric coincidence that your ancestors weaponized into a survival tool. The ninth skill is food identification without Google. Your stored food runs out on day 11. You must forage. The forest has edible plants. It also has poisonous plants that look nearly identical. Eastern hemlock looks like parsley. Water hemlock looks like wild carrot. Both are lethal. The universal edibility test exists, but takes 48 hours per plant. You rub the plant on your inner wrist and wait 15 minutes for a reaction. You touch it to your lip and wait 15 minutes. You place it on your tongue and wait 15 minutes. You chew and hold in your mouth without swallowing for 15 minutes. You swallow a small amount and wait 8 hours. If no symptoms appear, you eat a quarter cup and wait 8 hours. This protocol prevents death, but is agonizingly slow when you are hungry. Your ancestors learned plant identification from childhood. They knew 20 edible plants by sight in season. You know none. This gap cannot be closed by reading. It requires field time you do not have. The 10th skill is mental resilience without distraction. Your phone was your anxiety regulation tool. You scrolled when stressed, you watched videos when bored, you messaged friends when lonely. Those coping mechanisms are gone. You are now alone with your thoughts in a high-stress environment with no escape. The average person cannot sit in silence for 10 minutes without compulsive behavior. In a survival scenario, you will spend hours in silence waiting for water to boil, waiting for daylight, waiting for wounds to heal. You must tolerate boredom without distraction. You must tolerate fear without reassurance. You must make decisions without crowdsourced validation. This is the skill no one discusses because it has no procedure. It is simply endurance. And endurance is built through exposure, not instruction. These 10 skills share a common architecture. They are all knowledge that was once universal and is now rare. They were transmitted through observation and practice across generations. That transmission chain broke when electricity made them unnecessary. 2 generations ago, your grandparents knew these skills. 1 generation ago, your parents knew someone who knew them. Now you know no one. The knowledge has evaporated from your social network entirely, and when the infrastructure fails, you discover that competence cannot be downloaded. It must be lived. Every survival skill is a physical practice that requires repetition until it becomes automatic. Reading about fire starting does not make you competent. Starting 100 fires makes you competent. But you will not start 100 fires in your backyard because it seems unnecessary. It seems like paranoia. It seems like prepper cosplay. Until the night the phones die and you need fire and your hands do not know the motions. The gap between knowing and doing is where most people fail. They have read about survival, they have watched videos, they believe this constitutes preparation. It does not. Knowledge without practice is trivia. You can recite the steps of the bow drill method perfectly and still fail to produce an ember because your hands lack the muscle memory for consistent downward pressure. You can explain water purification chemistry and still drink contaminated water because you did not boil it long enough. The doing is everything, and the doing requires time and discomfort that modern life has conditioned you to avoid. We outsource discomfort to technology. We climate control our homes. We filter our water automatically. We navigate without thinking. Every convenience is a skill we did not have to learn. Every automation is knowledge we did not have to retain. And when the automation fails, we are left holding tools we do not know how to use and problems we do not know how to solve. This is not about romanticizing the past. Your ancestors lived harder lives with shorter lifespans. Technology improved human welfare measurably. But technology also created fragility. The system optimized for efficiency has no redundancy. A population optimized for specialization has no generalists. When the system fails, specialists cannot help you. The electrician cannot restore the grid without parts. The doctor cannot treat you without equipment. The grocery store cannot feed you without supply chains. You are reduced to the skills you personally possess, and for most people, that skill set is terrifyingly narrow. You can operate software, you can drive a car, you can microwave food. None of these skills function without electricity. You are educated and capable within a specific technological context. Remove that context, and you are effectively helpless. The solution is not to abandon technology. The solution is to maintain parallel capabilities. Learn to navigate by map and compass while using GPS. Learn to start fire with friction while carrying a lighter. Learn to purify water manually while trusting your tap. These are not competing priorities. They are layers of resilience. When one layer fails, the next layer activates. But most people have only one layer. They have only the technological layer, and when it fails, there is nothing beneath it. They are standing on a platform with no foundation. The platform was always temporary. It was always dependent on infrastructure maintained by strangers. And strangers will prioritize their own survival over yours when resources become scarce. The phone's dying is not a hypothetical. Electromagnetic pulse events have historical precedent. The Carrington event of 1859 was a solar storm that induced electrical currents strong enough to shock telegraph operators and ignite telegraph paper. If that event occurred today, it would disable transformers across continents. The National Academy of Sciences estimated in 2008 that a Carrington-class event would cause $2 trillion in damage and require 4 to 10 years for full grid recovery. 4 to 10 years, not 4 to 10 days. You cannot wait out a decade-long blackout with bottled water and canned goods. You need skills that function indefinitely without external inputs. You need to know how to find water, purify it, store it, and ration it. You need to know how to preserve food, grow food, and identify wild food. You need to know how to create warmth, light, and shelter using materials you can gather. You need to know how to navigate, communicate, and defend yourself without electronics. These skills are not optional. They are baseline survival requirements in any scenario where infrastructure fails for more than 72 hours. An infrastructure is more fragile than you think. The grid operates at near capacity with minimal reserve margin. A coordinated attack on 9 critical substations could disable power to the entire continental United States for 18 months. This is not speculation. This is testimony from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. The substations are not hidden. They are marked on public maps. They are not defended. Most have chain link fences and no guards. A small team with rifles could disable them in under an hour. This vulnerability has been public knowledge for over a decade. It has not been addressed because addressing it is expensive and the risk feels abstract. Until it is not abstract. Until it is Tuesday morning and your phone is dead and the water is off and you suddenly realize that every system you depend on was always one bad day away from collapse. You cannot prepare for every scenario, but you can prepare for the common failure modes: power loss, water loss, communication loss. These 3 failures cascade into every other crisis. They turn hurricanes into humanitarian disasters. They turn winter storms into mass casualty events. They turn civil unrest into survival scenarios. And they are all survivable if you have the skills. People survived for millennia without electricity. They navigated without satellites. They communicated without phones. They preserved food without refrigeration. The knowledge exists. It simply is not in your head. And the time to put it there is not during the emergency. The time is now. While you still have electricity to read this, while you still have free time to practice, while mistakes are still educational instead of lethal. Start small. Buy a compass and a topographic map of your area. Spend one afternoon learning to orient the map to terrain. Navigate to a landmark without using your phone. Notice how difficult it is. Notice how much you want to check GPS. Sit with that discomfort. That discomfort is the gap between your current capability and your survival need. Now go home and do it again next weekend, and the weekend after. Repeat until the discomfort fades. Repeat until the skill is automatic. Then move to the next skill. Learn to start a fire with a ferro rod. Then learn to start it with a bow drill. Learn to identify 3 edible plants in your region. Learn to purify water 3 different ways. Learn to preserve meat by salting. Learn to estimate time by sun position. Each skill takes 10 hours of practice to achieve basic competence. 10 hours is 5 weekends. 50 weekends is 1 year. In 1 year, you can go from helpless to functional, but only if you start. The night the phones die, most people will wait for rescue. They will wait for the government to restore order. They will wait for the grid to come back online. They will wait because waiting is what they have been trained to do. Every problem in their life has been solved by an external authority. The internet went down and the ISP fixed it. The power went out and the utility company restored it. The car broke and the mechanic repaired it. They have never been the solution. They have always been the customer. And when the service providers cannot provide service, they will continue waiting because they do not know what else to do. They will wait until the food runs out. They will wait until the water runs out. They will wait until waiting becomes dying. And then they will panic. And panic in numbers is indistinguishable from collapse.
You do not want to be in that crowd. You want to be the person who left the city on day 2 when the roads were still passable. You want to be the person who had a plan and the skills to execute it. You want to be the person who practiced the boring skills when they seemed unnecessary so that they were automatic when they became essential. That person survives. That person does not wait for rescue. That person is the rescue for their family, for their neighbors, for anyone lucky enough to be near them when everything fails. And everything will fail eventually. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Because every complex system contains the seeds of its own collapse, and the only variable is timing.